interests. And this is something that is part of our focus on increasing our self-knowledge. And it's been studied that interests are very strongly correlated with happiness and career and are a great indicator of possible major choice. So this is why we're exploring this, so that you understand yourself a little better and it can help you with the decisions that you need to make as a college student. You're going to want to have the assessment results available from your assignment when you took the California Career Zone interest assessment. So please have those out and available. We're going to do a little bit of self-assessment, but this will be nice for you to have those and compare once you get your results with your self-assessment. The theory of interests and how they relate to career comes from a researcher named John Holland. So he started out as an Army classification interviewer. So his job was to talk to people entering the Army to determine where they would best be placed in the many jobs that are available in the military. Later, he worked as a university counselor, so he worked with students not unlike yourselves. He found through all of his interviewing that he could really start to predict people's responses based on certain patterns. And eventually what he did was really group these patterns into 6 different types. And his theory was that people's interests would fall into these 6 different types, and that careers fell into 6 corresponding types. And that once your interests would match a work environment, it's considered congruent and you would be pretty happy in that work environment. So what they found through years of research and testing this theory is that congruence, or the match between your interests and the work environment, has been a good predictor of happiness with your occupation or your college major. The one thing to remember is that interests can be evolving and dynamic, particularly at this point in your life. Once you get a little bit older, your interests tend to stay pretty much in the same types. You might have, a couple of them flip or change. As you are all very young and you're learning about what you're interested in, they may change a little bit, but this gets you a start and gets you thinking about what your interests are, and you can really look at all these different types and know how different work environments fall into these types, and this can help you in the choices that you need to make. So why are we talking about interests? Why is this important for you to know? Well, first of all, by identifying your interests, it can help you really determine activities to get involved in, work that you would like to do, and kinds of things you might want to learn about, as well as how you actually prefer to do your work. And all of these things are important for you as a college student because you're going to have so many opportunities to get involved in activities. There's no way you can do all of them. So this will help you pick and choose, because unfortunately we only have 24 hours in a day, and only some of that we're actually awake. And it will help you think about what majors really fit your interest types and help you narrow that down. So there are, hundreds of different kinds of majors, and knowing a little bit about yourself will help you not be completely overwhelmed by all the options. Really knowing what your interests are can help you with fulfillment. If you are in a career environment that does not match your interests at all, you probably aren't going to be very happy. So making sure that the environment and your interest types fit pretty well is going to be helpful for you as you move forward. So as I mentioned, John Holland hypothesized that there were 6 different types, and these are what we call the Holland's topology. And these 6 themes are, as I said, correlated with people's interests and also an educational or vocational environment that matches up with it. So it's important to remember that this is about interest. This isn't about personality or skill. It's about what you get inspired by, what you're motivated to do, what you like to do, what you're interested in learning about, what kind of work interests you. So it's not saying necessarily if your interest type is artistic that you're an excellent artist. It just means that you have interest in that area. So I'm going to go through the 6 different types, and then I'll provide a little bit more detail as I move forward. So you'll see that the types are organized into a hexagon, and this is on purpose. The types are organized in a way where the ones that are next to each other are more similar, and the ones that are across from each other are very different. And different people may have types that are very different from each other, but it's good to know what the similarities are between these types. If you have a lot of overlap, if all your types are touching, then there's some very consistent themes in your interests, and you should really make sure that those are expressed in the work that you do or the education that you pursue. So, for example, I am artistic, social, enterprising. All of these have people focus, and so it's really, really important for me to work with people. So I'm going to start with realistic, and this is usually how it's written out. It's RIASEC, so it's sometimes referred to as RIASEC. So the letters will refer to the actual interest type. And you have to remember that these types, the titles are just that. They're just titles. It's not saying that if you're investigative, you're really good at investigating things. It's just a title to try and, put a name to the interest type. So realistic, these are the doers. So these are people who really like to work with their hands and their body, and they really like practical problems, and they like to figure things out by, maneuvering things, right? They deal with things a lot. Investigative, these are what we call the thinkers, and they tend to like to look at data and look at patterns and understand things through, information. Artistic, these are the creators. So again, this doesn't mean that you're necessarily really good at art or music or anything like that. You just are a creative person. You are interested in self-expression. You like to solve problems in a creative way. Social, these are the helpers. These are people who like to work with people for the sake of working with people. So you just want to help or teach or train other people because you want to be around people and help them. Whereas enterprising, these folks are really good at working with people, but they like to work with people for a purpose, for some kind of goal. So they're the persuaders. So these are people who either lead people or might try and convince people to either vote for them or buy something or something like that. They tend to be good at management and charismatic, but they are very good at working with people, just like social. Finally, we have conventional, and these are the organizers. You like to work with data and people in a way that you organize them and you put them into some kind of pattern that makes sense. And we'll explore this a little bit more as we move forward. So this chart will give you a little bit more detail about the interests for the RIASEC types. So it breaks it down a little bit more. For realistic, they really like outdoors, to be outdoors. They like they generally have technical interest and mechanical interest. So like putting things together, understanding things. The outdoor interest might be camping or it might be sports. They like to use their bodies generally or their hands. Investigative, they have scientific, inquiring, and analytical interests. So it's not always science, but they like to figure things out. So an example might be like a detective, right? They are very inquiring and ask a lot of questions, or a lawyer that, it doesn't necessarily relate to science, but it is something that's focused on figuring things out. Artistic is self-expressive. They like to somehow express themselves. That can be through the fine arts or writing or anything like that. And they generally have an interest in music, theater, and art. Social, they're interested in helping, guiding, or group-oriented interests. So people. Enterprising, entrepreneurial, persuasive, or political interests. So entrepreneurial meaning they want to start their own business or figure out a new way to make money. Persuasive is trying to convince other people of things. And then political interest because they tend to want to be a leader. And finally, conventional, they have methodical, organizing, clerical interests. So they really like to organize things. So if you look at, folks who are conventional types, they might really love having a collection of items because they get to organize and catalog them, or they might be very into organizing their space, a little bit of sort of the decluttering thing. This might be related more to data and other things like that. So there's a lot of ways you can you can express this interest in organizing things, but generally order of things or people is the interest of someone who's a conventional type. So I talked a little bit about where the items are on the hexagon is purposeful because they're related. So if you do have a type that the types are all pretty close to each other, it's what's called consistency. So just meaning you have similar interests in occupational themes. So as I shared, I'm ASE, so I'm consistent in my types because there's a lot of overlap there. It doesn't mean anything bad if you're not consistent. It's just a way of describing that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through some descriptions of these various interest types. And what I'd like you to do is get out a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to write down things that sound like you. And this can be from any of the categories, but just start recording things that you go, oh yeah, that's me. Because what I'm going to have you do is go through and do a self-assessment. And I realize all of you have taken the online assessment, but it's very important to also assess yourself for your interests, because assessments are great, but they're not perfect. They're written by somebody else. You may have had a bad day that day and just not really answered things as close to your own thought process. It may be the way that they phrased the questions may not have kind of clicked with you. So in addition to having the assessment results, which is helpful, I also want you to do a self-assessment. So the idea is that you listen and read and record things that sound like they describe you. And then at the end, you're going to say, okay, my top 3 were these. And see if they match your assessments from the California Career Zone assessment. And if they don't, which one do you think is more true to you? And you know you better than an assessment knows you. So it's important to remember that. The other thing that's really important to remember is that assessments are not prescriptive. So if they say, realistic is your top type and there are certain careers related to this interest type, it doesn't mean you have to pick a career off of that list. It just is giving you the language to describe some of your interest areas and to think about things you might want to be involved in or careers you might want to look into. And you may decide that, if you're realistic and artistic, that you're more on that artistic side, even if your R is higher for you. Again, it's about self-exploration and self-knowledge, and it doesn't mean that you have to just listen to the assessment. Also, you're going to get, you've already probably seen a list of careers related to your interest type on California Career Zone, and there are other places that you might look up careers related to your interest type. You have to remember that the list of careers that you're seeing is not an exhaustive list. So it's not going to include every career that's out there that might fit with your type. This is because there are thousands upon thousands of careers and many, many, many majors as well. And especially with careers, these things are changing all the time. There are careers that exist today that didn't exist 5 years ago. So knowing how to talk about yourself and talk about your interests is more important than picking a career off a list, although it can help you get started. But I just want you to know, I'm really interested in helping people, or I'm really interested in persuading people and being more entrepreneurial and a leader. That helps you understand certain careers because there are opportunities for that in some careers and less opportunities in others. So you can really assess options for yourself. And this relates to majors as well. Some majors allow for a focus on people, which would be really appropriate for a social type. Whereas others are really more analytical, which might be more appropriate for an investigative type. So this will help you just get started thinking about these things in a broader way. The list of careers and things like that can be helpful, but you do not have to rely totally on that. All right, so we're going to dive into the self-assessment. I'm not going to read every single thing that's on the slide because you guys can always pause and read it all, but I'll highlight a few things or explain a few things that I think might need more explanation. Each slide for each type is going to be divided into certain categories. So you'll have general characteristics of the type, activities that type might like, the way the type generally solves problems, generally how they approach relationships, examples of environments that this type would like, and examples of occupations. So it's just a few occupations, it's just some samples, but it's to give you an idea of what some careers related to that type might be. Please remember that these are overall descriptions. These are not, there's certainly variation between realistic types and artistic types. People are different. The other thing that's really important to remember is none of this is judging or judgmental. There are certain characteristics of people that might be more valued in our society, and you'll see that some of the descriptions of some of the types might not match that, but that's not a bad thing. It's actually good for you to know this about yourself, and none of it is judgmental. So when you hear certain words, like for example, artistic says dramatic, and we use that with a negative connotation, but really it means that you are expressing yourself in a way that's broad and engaging. It doesn't mean that you're a drama queen. So just keep that in mind as you assess yourself. If you feel like there's a word that makes you go, I don't like that word, try and think of it in the best possible light, because none of this is supposed to be a judgmental thing. All right, so for realistic, you're going to see a list of characteristics here. Stable, meaning you tend to kind of be reliable, persistent. When you come up against a challenge, you tend to kind of push through it and really want to get it done. Practical, self-reliant, nature-loving, that relates to the interest in the outdoors for a realistic type. Genuine, meaning what you see is what you get. And results-oriented. The motivation piece I've highlighted for all of the types. I think it's important to look at what you're motivated by. And the realistic type tends to be motivated by hands-on and tangible results. So they don't always love problems that don't have a clear end result, whereas some of the problems like, oh, I need to fix this bike, or I need to build a treehouse or something like that, has a very clear result. It's the bike is fixed or the treehouse is built. So that's something that you just want to keep in mind. If that's you don't like dealing with things that don't have this very clear result, you might be realistic, but maybe not, because this is only one part of it. Activities that you might be enjoy are hands-on activities, athletics. You may have mechanical skills, and you might like working with tools, objects, animals, or machinery. So animals very a tangible thing to work with. If you're raising cattle, it's very clear, how the results are, and it is very hands-on to do that. Tend to solve problems in a really concrete and practical way, and you like concrete and practical problems. So it's similar to the motivation. You like tangible results, things with clear results, and you like problems that are clear and concrete. So what that means is you would look at a problem like, oh, this refrigerator isn't working, how are we going to fix it, versus we need to address the social inequalities in our country through an exploration of cultural issues, right? Which isn't a very concrete problem. It's very confusing, and there are many aspects to it, and there's no one clear answer for that, versus there's probably one clear answer to fixing the refrigerator, if that makes sense. In terms of relationships, realistic types tend to prefer to work alone, but that doesn't mean that they're not very friendly and don't have a lot of friends. It's just the way they like to work. They tend to be not super expressive of their feelings, might be a little bit more stoic, and are very honest and genuine. Again, this idea of what you see is what you get with the realistic type. Possible occupations: fish and wildlife specialist, so somebody who works, tagging fish, or counting the remaining voles in the forest, right, and like dealing with the fish and wildlife issues. Engineer, so there are lots of different kinds of engineers, but they're all building something or creating something. And skilled trades, so things like welder or plumber. These are things that require a certain amount of skill, or a police officer. Environments that might be appealing to a realistic type are outdoor environments or rural places, potentially construction industry or structured organizations. And the structure in an organization is important to a realistic type because it's very clear where they are in the organization, and expectations are very clear. So that's something that realistic types like. So I'm going to go into some examples of things that these different types might be into. Again, this is not going to give you everything, but it's just some ideas of, oh yeah, I'm really into All-American Handyman. That might help you, connect with the types. So you might like TV shows like ESPN, which is a sports a network. It's a whole network, really, not just one show. But All-American Handyman, Top Gear, which I think they're working on either cars or motorcycles, and The Biggest Loser. Very tangible results. Is very active and focused on working with your body. You may like magazines like Sports Illustrated, Shape, which is another fitness magazine, Popular Mechanics, or Better Homes and Gardens, which is how to fix your garden in your home. For the investigative type, your characteristics might be that you're independent, you're logical, you tend to be innovative because you want to figure things out. You might be precise, so when you come up against something, you do pay attention to detail. Observant, and that's a big part of investigative, is you like to observe things and see patterns and analyze those patterns, and you tend to be pretty rational in the way you approach things. So you like to approach things in an analytical way, more maybe based on data and things like that versus just emotion. You're motivated by curiosity, learning, and exploring facts and ideas. So investigative types tend to really like to learn. So this is part of what you're motivated by, is how can I learn? How can I figure out new things? Activities you may enjoy if you're an investigative type is creative investigations. So this can be, this can mean a lot of different things. But for example, if you read mystery books, you might actually really like to try and figure out who done it instead of, other people that might more passively be part of it. Or if you just want to figure out, well, I wonder if ants would eat, artificial sugar, or if they're only going to go after fake sugar. I actually had a friend who did this just to try it. She is an investigative type, definitely. So these are just, ways of kind of figuring out the world around you. You may enjoy research, both, in your schooling, but maybe outside your schooling. If you, kind of spend all your time on Wikipedia and like to look up why things happened, that's kind of part of the investigative type, is this, I want to figure things out. I won't just take them at face value and analyze them. You may enjoy technical activities like writing, design, and implementation. In terms of the way you approach problems, you like to think through problems rather than immediately act them out. You may eventually act them out, but you want to spend some time to kind of sit back and really think it through. And this is part of that analysis piece related to the investigative type. With relationships, you do tend to want to work independently. You might work okay in pairs or small groups, but there's a lot of thought involved in the way that you approach things, because analysis takes a lot of thought. So you might need a little bit of alone time to do that analysis. You tend to cope with things that happen in your relationships in a rational, analytical way. So if you get in an argument with somebody, you might be one of those people that goes, well, that's not really true because, and then you provide evidence against it, versus just, being very emotional. You may actually kind of break things down in the relationship, which can, drive a non-investigative person crazy sometimes. You're a little more introspective. So that means you're good at understanding yourself and understanding your own thoughts, and you tend to analyze the way you're thinking and the way you're feeling. You may enjoy environments that are achievement-oriented, research and design companies, universities and colleges, because they're all focused on research and learning and things like that, or medical facilities. Some examples of occupations might be a doctor, physician, analyst. That can apply to a lot of different fields, but basically you are dealing with some kind of data related to the business and figuring out, how to improve based on the data that you've analyzed. Medical technologist or a technical writer. A technical writer is somebody who takes really complicated technical either instructions or tasks and puts it into terms that a general population would understand. So some things that investigative types might be interested in, they may like TV shows like Homeland, which is focused on the CIA, and there's a lot of mystery in that, but it's a lot of, investigating, right? CSI, which is a crime scene investigation. House, which is, he's a doctor who is a diagnostician, so he looks at strange symptoms and tries to figure out what the diagnosis is. You might like the Discovery Channel, documentaries, or Bones. Bones is about a forensic anthropologist. She figures things out based on the bones at a crime scene. You may enjoy reading National Geographic, Psychology Today, science journals, or mystery novels. So they're all either focused on learning or investigation, so kind of understanding things and analyzing things and looking for patterns. The artistic type, characteristics of somebody who falls into this type. You're intuitive, meaning you kind of feel things around you, rather than maybe, some other types that are more straightforward and analytical about things. You tend to be creative, expressive, so meaning you express yourself and your emotions. Unconventional, so you may be more comfortable with dressing in an unconventional way or living in an unconventional way that doesn't align with the rest of, society. You may be more, likely to dye your hair purple or something, just as an example. You tend to be progressive in the way you think and sensitive. Not meaning, sensitive to criticism, but you sense other people's feelings and things like that. You're motivated by self-expression. You want people to understand who you are. You want to express your thoughts and, your thinking and your emotions and who you are in, a variety of ways, sometimes in the arts, sometimes in other ways. Activities you may enjoy, of course, the sort of pure art forms like music, painting, and writing, but you may also like designing or composing. This is not just composing, the classical music. You could compose beats on your computer, or you may compose poems. There's a lot of things you could compose. You're creating something, basically. And also creating new ways of doing things. So I think a lot of people, when they hear artistic, they forget, or I guess assume, that artistic is people who are good at art. But actually, artistic is just about self-expression and figuring out different ways of approaching things in a creative way. So creative problem solving can fall into the artistic type. So if you have to create a program, let's say, to help students, with their communication skills, you would enjoy, figuring out new ways to do that, creating this new program. So it's not always the arts. Problem solving. So you deal with problems in an intuitive, expressive, and independent way. So it's less, okay, let's look at the data and analyze it. It's more, how would this affect other people? How do I feel about this? And you kind of get a sense for it more than, sitting and analyzing it. Tend to be adverse to rules, meaning you may chafe a little more than your average person at, a very structured organization or arbitrary rules that your boss puts forward or something like that. So you tend to want to be a little more independent. In terms of relationships, you prefer small and intimate groups. So you do like working with people, but you like it if it's a little bit smaller because you can connect a little bit better there. You may, become very immersed in your work or a project at the expense of, your relationships. Not meaning that you're hurting relationships, but sometimes you just get very involved and have to focus. And as I mentioned earlier, it lists dramatic, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, if you have an emotion or a feeling, you are very expressive of it, and so that is something that sometimes really endears you to other people because they know exactly how you're feeling because you're expressing yourself. Environments you may enjoy are unstructured and flexible situations. So just like you're sort of averse to rules and you might be a little more unconventional, it is usually a little bit better for artistic types to have some freedom in their schedule or in the way they approach their work. You may like radio, TV, and media organizations, educational institutions, or artistic settings. Examples of occupations: graphic designer. So these are people who use, a computer to design a variety of things, flyers, websites, things like that. Musician, journalist. So this is somebody who goes out and writes the news, but they're also journalists who write about music and journalists who write about art. An architect or museum director. Things you might be interested in if you're an artistic type: you may really like live theater and musical performances like concerts. You may enjoy the Independent Film Channel, Project Runway, which is a clothing designing competition show, Glee, which is a musical show, Face Off, which is similar to Project Runway. It's competition, but they create monster makeup instead of clothing. And I'm going to add one, a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. You might like that one as well. That's a very musically focused show. You may read Rolling Stone, Vogue, Architectural Digest, Entertainment Weekly, or novels and poems, because they're sort of a pure art form. Our social type. Characteristics of somebody who's social: you tend to be humanistic, which means you're really focused on the human experience, and you really care about other people. And that's not to say that other types don't, but you're very affected by how other people feel and circumstances that they're in. You tend to be verbal, so you are good at talking to other people generally. You have good interpersonal skills. You care about other people, you connect with other people, and you tend to be pretty responsible. Activities you might like: caregiving. So this can be, you like taking care of your little sister, or if you're a mom, that might be something you really enjoy, or a dad. You might, go and visit with folks at, an elderly care facility. You might really like taking care of animals. So you like providing your own services to help people, basically. You might like teaching, either in sort of a formal setting, or you just like instructing other people how to do certain things. Group leadership and planning social events. So if you're the one who goes out and always sets up that dinner out with your friends, you might be a social type. Problem solving: you deal with problems with your feelings. So you do think about how you feel and how others will feel in the way that you approach the problem, versus just looking at the best solution. You want to think about how it's going to impact others. You tend to be pretty flexible with problems, and you're motivated by helping and promoting the well-being of others. So that's what your key motivation is helping other people. Relationships: you tend to like working in groups, and you do like looking for close interpersonal situations. So it's important for you to have close friends and potentially close colleagues. Environments you may enjoy: schools, healthcare facilities, personnel offices. So what this means is like human resources, which is basically people who work to make sure that the work environment is a healthy one and people are feeling fulfilled in their work and not being harassed, and you provide training opportunities and things like that. So that's personnel offices, and sometimes do hiring, or social services agencies. Potential occupation you might enjoy: counselor, teacher, recreation director. So this is somebody who works for programs through the city that offer recreation. It can be camps or aquatics, things like that. It's really focused on people. Or speech therapist, somebody who helps people with speech impediments. Things you might enjoy, and you're going to see themes here, of course, they're all focused on people: Oprah, Dr. Phil, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. This is where they fix up somebody's house who is a person in need. Super Nanny: this is somebody who provides parenting advice to folks who are having trouble with their children misbehaving. Intervention: this is a show that people will come and support somebody who is either abusing certain substances or having some other kind of mental health issues. You may enjoy Psychology Today, People Magazine, parenting magazines, or Men's Journal. Enterprising. So our enterprising folks, characteristics of you tend to be persuasive. So you might be that person where, you and your friends are going out and you're like, I really want to go to this one restaurant, and you're able to persuade other people to do that. Or you might be that person who took debate and was always really good at kind of winning the argument in debate. Tend to be ambitious. You want to, be successful, enthusiastic, confident. Generally, people who are enterprising tend to be pretty good at being a leader, depending on the situation, and are sometimes very charismatic. They're motivated by persuading others and obtaining organizational goals. So as I said earlier, you are good at working with people, but you work with people for a purpose. So whatever that goal is, whether that's to get higher sales numbers or to get somebody to vote for you, it's always focused on a specific goal. Activities, you might like to lead or organize people in order to accomplish a goal. So you might, end up being the team captain, or you might end up, bringing people together to, do Habitat for Humanity, and you're the one leading it and kind of organizing it. I mean, there's a lot of different situations that this could come up, but you like to kind of lead people. You like to influence others. You tend to be an initiator of projects, kind of a go-getter with projects, and a decision maker. When problems arise, you tend to deal with them with the leadership skills. So you're able to get people together to work together to deal with a problem, and sort of organize those people and lead them. And you tend to deal with problems by applying your interpersonal communication skills. So you're really good with people, and you're able to talk to people in a way that helps you deal with the problem at hand. Relationships. You tend to take a leadership role in your friendships, and you do like to focus on tasks. So if you guys are out, let's say you go to an escape room or something like that, and people are chit-chatting, you might be like, hey guys, let's focus on getting out of this escape room. And you tend to be extroverted in your relationships. Environments, you might like retail firms, so selling things, government organization, leading people, corporations, industrial and manufacturing firms, again, selling, entrepreneurship, those sorts of things, or small independent firms. And so that just relates to, small business, basically. Or you may be interested in being a small business owner. Possible occupations might be public relations. So public relations people work to manage the image of either individuals or companies. It's sort of like marketing a person or an organization and dealing with scandal and things like that. Politics, a realtor, selling homes, or a lawyer. Enterprising. If you're enterprising, you might be interested in watching CNN, which is a news channel, The Apprentice, which used to have our President Trump as the leader there, but is basically people competing to get a job at his organization. Poker tournaments, election coverage, Boston Legal, Mad Men, which is a group of advertisers. It's about their work as these people who work on marketing. Survivor and House of Cards. House of Cards is a political drama. It's all about kind of leading and figuring out ways to maintain power. So you see some themes here that they're either focused on competition or politics or power. You may read Forbes, U.S. News and World Report, Time Magazine, or books about leadership and management. So finally, our conventional folks. Characteristics might be that you're conscientious, which means you're really interested in doing the right thing and doing a good job. Tend to be efficient. In your work, you're able to get it done in a very efficient, organized manner. You do tend to care about rules and regulations, so it's important to you to align with the structure and standards that are put forward either by an organization or society. You tend to be orderly, either in your space or with your work. Again, there's a variety of ways you can be organized and orderly. You're motivated by organizing, efficiency, and bringing order to data and things. You want to get things done in the most efficient manner, and you want to organize things so it all works really well. And that relates a bit to your conscientiousness. You want to do a good job through making sure that everything's aligned and works together. Activities you may enjoy: systematic, verbal, and numerical activities. So you might like, games that involve verbal things like Scrabble maybe, or Uno, these kind of games. You like quality control, not meaning that you want to go and check certain products, but if things aren't great, let's say in your home, you want to improve them. So you're interested in making things better. And you tend to avoid ambiguous situations. So you don't like when there isn't a structure, there isn't clear set of guidelines for the expectations for what you do or how you approach your work, or a social situation. Problem solving, you tend to like practical problems. So you see a little bit of overlap with R. They are next to each other. So practical problems are something you appreciate. You don't love the ambiguity there. You prefer to solve problems by applying rules. So what have people done before? What's the precedent? What do the guidelines say? So that really helps you sort of structure your approach. In terms of relationships, you're very sociable, but you tend to be a little more conforming than, let's say, our artistic types. So you're more likely to adhere to social norms than somebody who is an A, for example. And you do deal with things in a controlled and practical way. So you are able to sort of manage emotions and things like that. Environment, you may enjoy large structured organizations. You like having an established hierarchy and you know what your place is in an organization. You may like business offices, financial institutions, things like banks, or lenders, things like that, or inspection departments, which really focuses on quality control. You look and see if people are aligning with the rules put forward for a certain industry. Possible occupations you might enjoy: air traffic controller. So this is somebody who works for airlines and has airplanes come in a safe way. Bank examiner, computer operator. So this can mean a lot of things, but you might deal with data, or you might deal with data entry, or certain IT issues, or a math teacher. If you're conventional, you may enjoy HGTV, which is home and garden television. So, sort of about creating a structured environment, especially things that are about organizing. You might like the Marie Kondo show, which it's all about organizing someone's space. You might like the Food Network. This, might not make immediate sense, but, cooking often requires structure and rules, and there's generally like a clear approach to how you make food. CNET or Mad Money. Mad Money is about saving money, basically. You may read Real Simple, which is a magazine that has a variety of topics, but organizing comes up a lot. Wired, which is computer related. Consumer Reports, which is where you can look at different items and see if they've been ranked well or not, or The Economist. So now that you've heard a description of each of these types, I want you to go ahead and look back on your notes and see which ones you had the most items for. So which things sounded most like you. And then what I want you to do is I want you to pick your top 3 in order. So if you had the most for realistic, you would put your R first. If you had the second most for investigative, you would put your I second. If you had the third most for enterprising, you would put your E last. And that will be your type. It's almost always given to you in 3s. There are some occasions where somebody just does not get a high enough score to warrant it being in a top 3. So sometimes you'll have just 2, and that's okay. So if 2 of them sounded like you and none of the other ones sounded like you at all, then just put 2 as your code. That's totally fine. It's really rare that you just have 1, but I've seen it before on an actual, full form assessment. So, if you really think that's the case for you, go ahead and just put the 1 down. But you should at least have 1 outlier, ideally 3, and that would be your type. So you can go ahead and use that to look on California Career Zone, ONET Online, which is I'm going to talk more about when we get to career, but it allows you to put in your type and look at related careers similarly to California Career Zone. You can use this to research careers related to that type. But do remember, you know you better than anyone else knows you. You're pretty young, so these might eventually change over time. So when I first took this assessment, I was SAE. And then I took it again when I was older and I was ASE. Generally, you're not going to completely change, but you may have a flip or something that might get a little stronger. So, and that's okay. It still gives you an idea of where you are now and helps you make some decisions about career and major for where you are now. So this is hopefully helpful for you to start to be able to talk about yourself, to look at majors, to understand how your interests relate to career, and to really maybe eliminate a bunch of things at the very least. So if you are so not enterprising, then you can make sure that you're focused on careers that don't involve that. So even if it doesn't help you pinpoint a particular career major, it'll at least help you eliminate a group of them. So write it down, keep this in mind as you move forward as a student, and I think it can be really helpful for you in all the various decisions that you have to make.